And I think there is a parameter that talks about how you view timelines and how you actually value time. And there I realized that I'm getting perceived as someone who's imposing difficult and sometimes unrealistic timelines just because I want to achieve the project on a set time. And that's how I view time. And in that moment I realized, okay, that's my bias. Because I value individual achievement way too much.
Country Navigator, the Hippo question. A podcast all about cultural intelligence and inclusion. We're asking loads of people the important questions to find out what makes them tick and how culture has impacted their lives. We're going to look at their cultural hippo and find out what we can learn from the people who've made a career out of leveraging culture and inclusion.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Hippo question. And it is an absolute delight to have our very special guest, Yamini Gupta, with us today. Very much looking forward to hearing all about Yamini's life story and hearing about what, makes her wake up and go to work every morning and understand what is her ultimate Hippo question. Yamini, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm very happy to be here on this podcast.
It's great to have you here. And for the people who listen to the podcast, you don't know this, but we're recording it on a Thursday, which means that my first question is going to be a bit weird. But Yamini, can you tell us, as your blog is called Life on the Weekend, what did you do this weekend? How was your weekend?
Thank you, Matthew. Actually, the last weekend was very interesting. I went to a nearby tiger reserve, a national park called Ranthambore National Park. It's a widely known tiger reserve that attracts a lot of international tourists because of the frequent tiger sightings that you can actually enjoy in this tiger reserve. And it's that time of the year when tiger sightings are quite frequent because it's really hot at this time of the year in the country, and you can actually sight a tiger near a watering hole. So sighting a tiger in the wild up close at just a few feet away from you is really an unparalleled experience. So yeah, I had a great weekend.
I'll be honest, it's not necessarily an experience I want. I don't want a hungry tiger anywhere near me.
Matthew, isn't it funny? Because our last guest had hippos in his backyard. Now we've got someone on. There is a connection here, isn't there?
We're doing the wrong podcast, Nikki. It should be about animals.
Yeah.
People love travel and nature, so I think there's a connection there, definitely. Yeah. But Yamini, it's amazing that you've had such a fantastic weekend, right? And I bet, obviously you love writing about it, you love blogging about what you've been up to. There must be a connection between, what you do on the weekends and bringing that whole self to work. What's that connection for you?
Yeah, I agree that there is definitely a connection. And I feel that I'm really fortunate to be born in a country that appreciates and celebrates unity in diversity. India has 28 states, 7 union territories, and over 200 spoken vernacular languages. At every 400 to 500 kilometers, the culture changes in the country, the language or the dialect changes, the landscape changes, and in most of the situations, even the weather changes in the country. So you have to continuously adapt yourself to ever evolving ecosystem. I think this has a bearing in your work life also. Even in my professional life, I have changed roles every 2 or 3 years over the last 13 years that I've been working nonstop. And I think this has really helped me to adjust and adapt to changing circumstances of either a startup or a Fortune MNC, wherever I have been working. The other thing that I feel travel truly teaches you is that when you are traveling, you are no longer the person that you are back home or at work. There are no titles, no labels. You do not have any positional authority or any extra influence that you actually enjoy in your circles of familiarity. You have to mostly rely on your wits or intellect when you're actually in a difficult situation. And that also has a lesson for you in your work life, where you are actually working in a global setup with different individuals or teams that might have different context and perspective. The lessons that you have learned in the past might not be valid, and you have to be open to learn to new things and to continuously actually gather information and to adjust and accommodate. And I think that's what travel teaches you.
It's an amazing perspective, and I think as I mentioned earlier on, I've read some of the pages. There's a huge amount of stuff on your blog, and it'll take me a lot longer than I've had to read all of it. But I mean, you're very direct on your website. You talk about the diversity of India, but you also talk about the fact that obviously Britain and India have an unfortunate history.
Yeah.
You talk very clearly about Britain came and robbed India of its resources. Do you think there's that theme that it's very easy for outsiders in particular to underestimate India?
It's a very difficult question to answer, to be very honest, because you have to be really fair. And coming from the background that I come from, you can't have biases while answering this question. You have to be
Yeah,
really fair to all sides of all sides that are involved here in this discussion. But I do believe that India hasn't enjoyed the kind of spotlight that the country actually deserves. If purely speaking from a travel perspective and nothing else, if you ask, if you talk about the travel opportunities that India has, not a lot of international tourists or not a lot of international destination. Not a lot of international tourists would know what is the kind of opportunities that India has. In a lot of corporate situations, I have still sensed the fact that a lot of people from Europe still view India as a country that's full of snake charmers. While that's no longer true. India has become an IT power. A lot of American companies have Indian CEOs or CEOs who have India as their origin. In fact, Britain's prime minister has an Indian rooting. So India, I think, as a country, is changing quite a lot. Its perception, its reputation is also changing in the world, but we still have a long way to cover in terms of enjoying the spotlight that the country deserves.
But
I'm
Yamini,
not sure if I've answered your question.
no, no, great answer.
Yamini, I
But
do
yeah.
have a follow-on question with that because obviously I'm of Indian origin. I live in the UK, so I'm a British national now, etc. But I do have isn't that a pain point of most countries? And that's where cultural intelligence speaks volumes, right? It's the
Mm,
stereotype that the country has to break each time
mm,
because
mm,
it's and I'm being very simplistic here, okay? All Germans are on
mm,
time, or all
mm.
Swiss are on time because they
Yeah,
watches
yeah.
everyone else. It's too simplistic a viewpoint.
Mm,
And I think
mm,
organizations, particularly tying this back to business, organizations have that unique realization that there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of, really superb talent in India in what is available. And yet India still has that stereotypical approach that it is the place you offshore for cheap
mm,
talent. Right?
mm, mm.
What do you make of that? I mean, you work with an international organization, you have colleagues in Europe. Do you get a sense of that, or are you feeling always on par with wherever else the global HQ might be?
Hmm. It's a very relevant question, Nikki, and thanks for asking that. I do think that there is a huge need to break that stereotype. Even though there might be a lot of talent opportunities in the country, still we suffer from a lot of stereotypes, and actually we ourselves need to be blamed for that. Belonging to the Asian economy that we do take pride in overstretching, in going the extra mile, working beyond the stipulated hours and wearing it as a badge of honor. We have actually somehow perpetuated that stereotype. And uh, I have to admit that a little bit of that also needs to be acknowledged to the kind of culture that we belong to. We are programmed to respect hierarchies because of our backgrounds, and we are programmed to respect elders and not question people who might enjoy a positional authority over us. Because of that, we continue to suffer from that stereotype. And I think this is where culture intelligence will play a greater role in first educating us as well as people outside India what culture differences can lead to. You know that there is an imbalance in work life, and there is an imbalance in the kind of working hours that Asian economies actually put into vis-a-vis their counterparts in Europe. And then actually creating that intelligence, because to be able to reach that level you first have to start from awareness. And I think that's where culture intelligence can really play a great role.
Yeah. And
And I think just to pick up on a topic, I'm going to read something to you. I think you might recognise this quote. It says, "Do not be too timid and squeamish about your actions. All life is an experiment. The more experiments you make, the better. What if they are a little coarse and you get your coat soiled or torn? What if you do fail and get fairly rolled up in the dirt once or twice? Up again, you shall never be more so afraid of a tumble." I think I mean, obviously that's a quote from Emerson. You've told us it's your favourite quote. I mean, when it comes to cultural intelligence, it is about experimentation. I mean,
Yeah.
how have you seen that? How have you seen that sort of
Hmm.
need to challenge things by trying and allowing yourself to
Hmm.
fail?
Hmm. Very interesting. I'll tell you something personal here. So, I am aware of the fact that I have been brought up in a way that I shouldn't be questioning elders or I shouldn't be questioning authority. And I associate myself as I relate myself to rebels a lot. There is a book by Adam Grant called Originals. I'm not sure if you've read that book, but then there is a chapter dedicated to rebels. And I relate so much with that chapter. So sometimes I catch myself overcompensating, actually asking too many questions to kind of prove the point that I am not scared of authority, or I feel absolutely comfortable challenging status quo or challenging the situations and asking for more information, because I will not take your word as is. So somewhere I think this is also an extreme behavior and doesn't work really well when you are trying to collaborate with people. So, and the right or the optimum behaviors somewhere fall on the spectrum. Either you are too extreme where you are getting scared of asking questions or challenging, or stepping out of your comfort zone, or you are behaving totally on the extreme side where you are doing too much of it to show that you are not trying to fit in but you are trying to stand out. So somewhere on the spectrum you have to find that sweet spot. But how do you find that? That's difficult. That's where you need support. So if you are really aware of the fact and you have the space, you have the liberty to experiment, because not all organizations and not always in life you will have the space to experiment, or you will have the freedom to bear the consequences of your experiment, because not every experiment will also succeed. So I believe organizations will have a great role in in setting up their teams or setting up their people for this kind of cultural intelligence. If they can provide space for people to bring whatever original or whatever authentic selves they can bring to the organization, this is a great start. For example, in my current organization, I work in India, but I have my team members in Southern America and Europe, and not all the time we have time overlap. But because we work in a remote setup, we have to be on meetings almost all the time. But many a time I put my foot down that I will not stretch beyond a certain hour, because I start my day really early, and I ensure that my team members who are in other parts of the globe actually stretch equally to be able to make time and work on shared projects. So I think voicing out and speaking up your mind and also establishing boundaries is equally important. but for that to happen, you first have to know what are those boundaries for you, and you have to define those boundaries.
That's
I have to
absolutely
say, I do wish
fantastic.
Nikki was a little bit more of an Indian stereotype. I'm older than her. She certainly doesn't respect any of my age authority.
Yes, I know what Yamini is busy doing, right? Establishing boundaries and questioning the status quo, and have to do it. And this is where I was going with this. I think it's an absolute fascinating perspective because you're talking it from a cultural perspective. And I was thinking, all marginalized populations, whether it's gender or ethnicity or race or sexual preference, etc. If you consider all of these groups and how diversity and inclusion and equity and belonging has become so critical in organizations. And it's tying it back in my head to what you were saying. You need to establish the boundaries by knowing what they
Mm.
are, but you also need champions within the organizations, right?
Yeah.
To
Mm.
support, to create that environment where people feel comfortable, call it psychological safety, to challenge that status quo. Only then can stereotypes be broken down, only then can perceptions change. And I know you're a huge champion, and you've just recently won an award in your organization for your mentorship program, Amplify. Tell us a little bit about that. Why do something like that?
Mm. It was a very interesting program when we launched it. Right now, the whole world is about generative AI. Everyone is talking about Chat GPT and its applications and how the face of learning, talent, and capability is changing with it. But 2 years back, when we introduced this program, this concept was still picking up pace. And at most, a lot of organizations had rolled out learning experience platforms where an algorithm at the back end actually reads your preferences and recommends the right kind of learning solutions for you depending upon your taste and preferences. At that time when we launched the mentoring program called Amplify, we actually leveraged an AI algorithm that takes into account your interests, your skills, and your career goals, and match you to the right kind of mentor who can help you further your mentoring goals. So if I want to sign up for a mentoring program, I might want to grow my skill set, or I might want to learn a behavioral skill like how to be more assertive or how to network across geographies, or simply I just want to talk to someone from a different function and actually exchange best practices. And the mentoring program was designed to take that into account and then actually help you facilitate a match so that the engagement actually is meaningful for you. And then at the end of 1 year, we realized that we had great feedback. We had few but very meaningful mentoring engagements going on to the on the platform, and our feedback score was 4.7 if I'm correct out of 5, while the industry benchmark that year was 4.5. So it was really interesting, and I think it was interesting because we could personalize the experience instead of just giving them a template that these are the mentors, reach out and then just begin your engagement. So personalization, I think, was the key there.
And yeah, I mean, I think a lot of organisations have mentoring programs, and I think from my experience, not all organisations know why they have mentoring programs.
Yeah.
I'd be
Yeah.
really interested to know, so a why did you decide to launch it, and how are you measuring the success of that?
Hmm. Hmm. Again, an interesting question. Why we decided to have a mentoring program was because of how the organization was constructed. We are a global organization and we are present in so many countries, and there is a very diverse and unique workforce working across time zones. So we realized that to be able to foster connections across geographies, and we realized that most of us wanted to actually expand our networking beyond our spheres of work. In an organization like this, it's very easy to work in silos. Even if you are in a global setup, you tend to interact with the same set of people, you tend to work with the same set of stakeholders. So to be able to break that and actually give the experience to employees to be able to expand their horizons, we thought that mentoring would be the right approach, where you need not necessarily reach out to your seniors or your leaders, but also connect with your peers across functions and across geographies, which will give you a better experience. So that's why we introduced mentoring. when we introduced it in the first year, we decided not to have too many matrices and not to chase numbers, rather focus on meaningful connections. It's very easy for learning and development professionals to confuse success with numbers, number of people who've onboarded the program without actually taking anything away from it. So we decided that we will not chase the metric of how many people are there on the platform. Rather, we will focus on enabling people to actually have meaningful conversations and then take it to the end. So that was the only metric that we were following up in the first year.
I mean, that's absolutely great. I mean, I very much believe that cultural intelligence is grown through connecting with people, through building those relationships, and it sounds like your mentoring program is enabling exactly that.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Thank you for asking that.
Yamini, I mean, I think as a leader, as a woman leader, particularly, do you sort of, are you a mentor or a mentee yourself?
I think I've been in a position, been in both positions. I have been a mentee in multiple situations where I'm trying to solve a problem, or I'm picking up a new project or stretch assignment, or even if I'm in familiar situations but trying to overcome a challenge, maybe too much work, too many difficult commitments or to grapple with, or sometimes working with tough stakeholders and trying to achieve a fine balance. In such situations, most of the times I have challenged myself that I might not have the right answer to all the problems, and I might have to learn how to ask for help. This has always been a development area because I come from a background where we place a lot of value on individual achievement. So I try to solve everything on my own. It's been a learning for me to ask for help, and that's where mentoring has really helped me. I do not think twice before reaching out to my peers or people who I have developed a connection with while working with external partners or simply seniors or leaders at work. And I think because of this behavior, because I somehow give the comfort to other people that it's okay to ask for help, okay to ask for advice. People reach out to me all the time asking for help, asking for small little things like how do you do that, how did you manage that, you work with this stakeholder, how do you manage to create that kind of rapport. And I think it's really a great and a satisfying stint in an organization or otherwise also in life when you can actually cultivate these kind of relationships where you can actually help other people and also receive help. Then you can reflect on your experiences and see that there has been meaning and there has been value in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you've talked so much about experiences and where you come from and your background. And I'm curious, it's complete curiosity. What was the life-changing moment for you in your life? What led you to doing what you do right now, right? Leading a global organization like OLX Autos out of India, but also, your travel blog. What has driven all of this?
Very interesting question. I haven't thought about it much, but there have been two instances actually, Nikki. If I have to be really honest, the first one was right out of the college. When I passed out of management college, I was placed in a bank, and I was the sales manager, the banking sales manager in that bank. It was one of the leading banks of India. I would not take the name. And then when I was doing that role, I realized that I was not able to convince the customers to actually invest in banking products when I was being true to the description of banking products, when I was actually speaking the truth that this is the investment avenue, this is the rate of deposit, this is how your money will grow. I was not able to convince them because I was not using flowery language. And that's when I realized this is not the career that I want to be. I need to be in a role where I can actually use or leverage my skills to teach or to give back or to coach or mentor. And that's how learning and development happened or HR happened, because I'm a marketing graduate and I ended up being in HR. That was the first moment I realized, not banking. Banking is not my cup of tea, especially from a sales perspective. And then the second time it happened when I was part of trainings and communications team, but in business. It was becoming increasingly difficult for me to convince business to actually stop business operations for a while and dedicate that time to training, process training, product training, or behavior trainings. And after a point in time, you reach a plateau in business, and you need to step out of that zone and think from a different or a larger angle, from a talent perspective, and to think about how you can influence talent decisions and not just talk in the training parlance. And then that was the second moment I decided that now I would like to build my career in human resources, and that's how the shift happened. So I think these have been two defining moments in my career over the last 13 years.
It's fantastic that you've been able to be true to yourself, true to your own values, and I think it sort of almost touches on a really complicated sort of fashion at the moment about bringing your whole self to work. Have you got any view on that fashion, on that particular phrase?
I do. It might not be a popular view that I'm going to share with you. Uh, I, in my perspective, I do not think that you can bring your whole self to work. Bringing your whole self to work has many repercussions, and you as a person, as a whole self, you could be a person with different preferences, different working style, or your personality might be really different. And if you try and bring the whole personality to work, it might or might not gel well with your stakeholders or with the team members that you have to work with day in day out. I'll just take an example. A lot of us associate ourselves with being a night owl or an early bird. But if you are in a global setup, you cannot impose that kind of preference on the other person. If you have overlap only during the day or only during the evening, you make do with it. And
Mm.
the other example is some of us like to think out loud, get on a meeting every time we have an idea and brainstorm with each other. These are very fundamental examples, but actually speak a lot about how we work with each other. And there are some of us who like to think through a problem, take some time, absorb the information, and then come back and present to the other person. I think these are some of the nuances to your whole self, which is why I think it is not practical to bring your whole self to work. That being said, I do believe that what you can actually ensure while you are working in an organization or while you are living your life on a day to day basis is what is your value system. And you must choose roles or you must choose organizations that allow you to be in congruence with your value system. For example, for somebody, respect or dignity might be a value that they are not willing to compromise with. And if they are in a role or an organization that allows them to be respectful, to protect their dignity, this is a great place to be. Similarly, somebody might have adventure as a value, and if they value adventure or experimentation a lot, a role that has a very structured template or a very routine defined might not be the best fit for them. So I think from that perspective, I would say value system is a better metric to define whether you are able to find harmony with your organization and with your role.
I'm
Absolutely.
really
Certainly don't want to bring your tigers from your weekend trip to work. That would be a rather difficult.
contentious here, Yamini. I mean, I love it. Sounds amazing, right? Go and find a role that meets your value systems and allows you to develop and grow as an individual. Majority of the people listening out there will say, damn, you're lucky. We're not that lucky. We have to
Mm,
work because we've got to put bread on the table, right? Or whatever it is that you need
mm,
money for, etc., etc. Very few people, even after post-pandemic, are in a
I agree.
position where they can choose to do what they would be passionate about,
Mm,
what they would love.
mm,
Which is where I think, I like what you're saying about having to adapt. You can't bring your whole
mm,
self to work
mm,
always, right?
mm,
And you're always becoming who you are by staying true to who you are. And perhaps that is a way of bringing your whole self to work, in knowing that that adaptation to a circumstance or a situation is also part of your whole self. Perhaps
I agree.
I find it really
I
difficult when
agree.
people say bring your whole self, and I'm like, I mean, I'm working from home, so yes, I bring my dog to work, and I bring my dog turns up on calls with clients, etc. But there is a limit to the whole self that I want to bring
Yeah.
to work.
I agree. I agree. Absolutely. There is a limit to to the whole self that you can you can bring to work. Absolutely. For
Yeah,
the lack of a better definition.
absolutely. And that's sort of amplified, hasn't it, with all this hybrid working? So I'm going to ask you the question that everyone's been asking. Has hybrid worked? Is it here to stay? And
Mm.
what's happening at OLX? How are you coping with this?
I would like to answer this question differently. I think hybrid must stay for a long term. If you take the long term perspective, and if you think about the talent race and the great resignation, the great layoff, if you put everything in perspective, organizations that will win the larger game would be the organizations that would allow their talent to work remotely. However, that being said, it is also true that in the last 3 years, we have seen a lot of focus on mental health and well-being, because somewhere it's taking a toll on all of us. Human beings as a species are meant to be social. We enjoy cultivating connections, we want to build relationships, and the deeper the relationship is, the better it is for us in the long term. So definitely allow for talent to join remotely and give them the space to be in a hybrid work environment, but every once in a while, or at least once in a quarter, if not more frequently, we must bring the teams together in an in-person setting so that we can get to know each other, we can bond, we can talk about things which are not necessarily related to work, but to get to know each other better. I mean, the other day, I'll give you an example. The other day I went to office and I couldn't identify most of the people I was seeing on the floor, and I was feeling so uncomfortable, because I used to be the person who would know everyone on the floor, not if not in the entire building, everyone on the floor, because around the water cooler or in cafeteria, I would usually connect with people over a cup of tea, and how tea is the best beverage in the world, and where they have traveled over the weekend, what they are doing over the next weekend, what's the latest movie that they have watched. It doesn't have to be work related connections, and that's what I think we are missing as part of being the corporate global workforce. And I do think that it's important for everyone to be together in the same place and just enjoy some good in-person connection and develop real meaningful bonds with each other. So allow for hybrid, but then also create opportunities for people to come together.
Yeah, I completely couldn't agree more. Connection is all about creation and collaboration. And if you want creation and collaboration, you've got to allow people to connect. So, no, thank you.
Yeah, true.
Matthew, I think it's that time.
I think you're right. I think we're going to have to move to the hippo question. We talked about tigers. So Yamini, just to put this in context, we use as a model of culture a hippopotamus. A lot of people use icebergs, and icebergs are fine, but we like the hippopotamus. And the point of using a hippo is that a hippo spends most of its time with just sort of 10-15% of its nose above the water, and the rest is below the surface. And with culture, we know it's the bit that you can't see that trips you up. It's the difficult bit. And so the hippo question is this: what do you have any sort of examples or stories or situations where you've been become very aware of that cultural bit below the surface? Is there an example you can give, or something you can tell us from your experience, or watching other people? Be really curious to hear whether you've got anything you can add to the hippo collection.
Yes, yes. And I think I would have to give some credit to the country navigator culture profiling also here. many a time over the last 6 to 7 years, from the time I became a people manager and I started leading teams, and then I started leading cross functional teams in the last 4 or 5 organizations that I have worked with, I've realized that many a time my team members, sometimes my bosses, and a lot many times my peers have complained that I try to impose uh, unrealistic timelines, or sometimes I get too tough on the schedule, on the time schedule, because I tend to manage long term projects, and I used to feel that they are just slacking, or they are just saying because they want to get out of the work responsibilities. I never realized that I might have a bias here, because I value so much on individual. I value individual achievement so much, and the kind of background that I have come from, I think that there has to be no two ways about work achievements. If you have committed to something, then you have to deliver it, no matter what, without paying much attention to that. Sometimes timeline might not be the best metric to evaluate the success of a project. And even though people used to complain all the time, I used to think that it's normal, it's part of the normal workplace conflict. I never paid too much attention to it. But when I looked at my cultural profile on Country Navigator, I realized that there is a comparison between on a set of different parameters. Nikki and Matthew, maybe you can explain better. And I think there is a parameter that talks about how you view timelines and how you actually value time. And there I realized that I'm getting perceived as someone who's imposing difficult and sometimes unrealistic timelines just because I want to achieve the project on a set time. And that's how I view time. And in that moment I realized, okay, that's my bias. Because I value individual achievement way too much, I have all these years I have like totally avoided discounted the fact that many of my colleagues who were working with me and who were equal partners on the project were feeling uncomfortable with that. And there might be an alternate view to solve that problem, or there might have been alternate philosophies to actually address that project. And that's I have still not been able to solve that. Still getting complaints on my project, but at least I am aware of that bias, and I might just solve it in the next podcast. In the next time when we speak, I feel I might have a different Hippo question then.
I mean, it does sound like exactly like a cultural hippo. A hippo is lumbersome. They're difficult to get moving, and that's the challenge with our cultural biases.
But
It
once,
takes a lot of work to get moving them.
God forbid anybody who's in the way of a hippo, right? We also know that
Absolutely.
to get that traction going.
Yeah.
You're on something here, and I think the key thing, right, about, and I'm preaching to the converted here, the key thing about cultural intelligence is greater self-awareness. The only way
Yeah.
you can do anything about your own behavior is to first know that you do things a certain way, or you like to do things a certain way. And that's what the cultural, world's prison profiling tool is about. It's about understanding that you like to do things a certain way, and then having the ability to kind of look at your colleagues or your team and say, they like to do things slightly differently to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Great.
Fascinating.
And I think country platforms like, or solutions like Country Navigator can actually play a great deal of influence there, and can actually at least create awareness. After that, whatever you do is might be a function of your own willingness and your own openness to change or transform. But at least creating that baseline of awareness is very important, and a must start point. And I think the Country Navigator does a great job there.
Thank you.
I think we can see the marketing graduate come through. And before we get before we appoint Yamini as our new head of marketing, I think we probably better thank you very much there for your contribution.
Thank you,
I've really
Matthew.
enjoyed the conversation. I think it's been brilliant.
And it's surely not the end of it here, Yamini, because we'd love to talk to you some more. I know our listeners will want to hear you some more. So thank you very much for being here today. I know you're based in India, so it's late afternoon for you. And it's been an absolute pleasure and delight to have you on the podcast. So thank you very much.
Likewise, Nikki. And it was lovely meeting you, Matthew. I think the more number of people I meet from Country Navigator, the more impressed I get. And I have told Nikki, but in my previous organization, in Tata Communications, we worked with Country Navigator, and I carry the impact or the perception that I have for the organization. I carry it from that previous organization, and hence it's that strong.
Fantastic. And for the readers who want to see lots of pictures of tigers and who want to read more about the amazing opportunities in India for travel and seeing nature, please do visit lifeonweekends.com. And you'll be able to read much more of Yamini's trips and what she gets up to at the weekend.
Yeah,
Thank you
just
very
get us
much.
all jealous, right? That she has this wonderful life. I think that's definitely worth reading.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
The Hippo Question with Country Navigator, the #1 platform for cultural intelligence and inclusion training. Tune in for more interviews with global business leaders and find us at countrynavigator.com.